Oh, come on, France, really? You're going to commemorate the Battle of Verdun with Hollande kissing the cheeks of Merkel after an anti-white, anti-Christian and anti-French concert? Really? Hello everyone, and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Now, whenever I dare to allow myself the luxury of contemplating the idea that things can't get any worse on a cultural level, reality comes down heavily upon me and wakes me up and reminds me that if there is a cultural rock bottom, Europe is still very far from reaching it. For those of you unfamiliar with history, and I'm not saying this to be smug, but they no longer teach these things in school nowadays. Anyway, the Battle of Verdun is a battle that took place 100 years ago throughout the year 1916 and lasted for 303 days. 70,000 men died every month. Roughly 715,000 men died in this battle. 377,000 Frenchmen and 337,000 German men. And it wasn't just men. Boys as young as 14 were also sent to fight. They don't teach that in schools. They teach that French upper-middle-class girls were oppressed for having to take lessons in ballet, thus enforcing gender stereotypes. That's what they teach these days. Heaven forbid they honor the memory of the hundreds of thousands of men and boys who died so modern-day pansies don't have to speak German. The Battle of Verdun was the longest in human history and in top 5 the most costly battles in human history. It is one of those moments of 20th century history of Europe that needs to be properly commemorated. But then again, the meaning of the word proper has been lost, at least on the elites of France, particularly the presidential institution. Now that's the only explanation that I can come up with that doesn't contain insults. Now how would you explain the gesture of the Élysée Palace to organize a concert, an element of fun, when the descendants of those who died at Verdun mourned the sacrifice of their forefathers? And that's the smallest issue actually. The biggest issue is that the headline of the concert is one of the most bigoted scum that can exist in the French culture. The Élysée Palace thought it is appropriate and hip and in line with the youth to commemorate the Battle of Verdun through a celebration and through a concert, and invited Alpha Diallo, better known as Black M or Black Mesrim, a rapper of Guinean descent who utterly hates white people, hates Europe, and generally hates anyone who isn't like him. In this fine gentleman's opinion, France is a kuffar nation that needs to be purged of its kuffardom, and anyone who has sex other ways than he is ought to be executed yesterday if possible. Now isn't he a lovely fella? Now you tell me, how much sense does this make? How are the values of liberté, égalité et fraternité upheld on the Battle of Verdun commemoration event by bringing this racist, sexist, warmongering fucktard on the stage? That's a serious question. A comedian makes a joke about being butthurt and is swiftly hunted down for homophobia, and all the usual suspects go full Macintosh in the usual rags, because I can't call that press even if my life depended on it. And yet this guy's been preaching the execution of anyone who isn't like him and war against the Republic itself, and no one bats an eye. Now if you speak French, please do look up and see what the lefties have to say about this representative of diversity, progress, and multiculturalism. If this guy had been white, he'd be in jail by now, or writing songs from outside of France to avoid persecution. Now mind you, I don't support prosecution for opinions, no matter how vile and repulsive, but I also don't support hypocrisy. If he had been white and preaching the execution of Muslims and non-whites, we all know what would have happened to him, don't we? But more importantly, nobody should support this guy being paid with taxpayers' cash to perform his trash, and that some insist to call art, especially on a day that is meant to commemorate an event that marked the history of France and Germany and continental Europe at large. This is simply insane. Now seriously, can you imagine, let's say, an anti-Japanese rapper performing on the Hiroshima Day? I sure cannot. Or maybe a white nationalist performing on taxpayers' cash on the Day of Reconciliation in South Africa? That's on December 16, by the way. Can you imagine that? Because I sure cannot. And if a South African politician would come up with such an idea, we all know what would happen. So why should this outrageousness be tolerated? Now the answer is that it shouldn't. This is an absolute disgrace and a spit in the face of the Frenchmen. There's no way to work around that. Anyway, please do support the good Frenchmen and women who protest this, and if you have business in France, make sure you let the French authorities know how you feel about your corporate tax being used in this fashion. I know I will. And with that being said, thank you for watching and for supporting this channel. I'll see you soon on Freedom Alternative.